Hey, this is John F. Murs, author, actor, and owner of 1021 Studios, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Max Bowen.
And I'm Curtis Hughes. Max, how's it going, buddy?
Curtis, it's going really good, man. But I have a question to pose to you, sir. Have you ever been at a friend's house for dinner and it is just awkward as fuck?
Yeah, many times actually.
Excellent. Well, that's good then, because you'll have a good perspective for our next guest, because her book is all about a dinner that goes about as bad as you can possibly imagine. The book is called Question, Not My Salt, released through our good friends at Crystal Lake Entertainment. The author, Amanda Blake, joins me. Amanda, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
To start things off, could we get a quick run through as to what this book is all about?
Absolutely. Question Not My Salt is, as you so astutely pointed out, it's about going to a family dinner for Thanksgiving. It's my main character's first time at an American Thanksgiving dinner. She wants to know what it's all about. And she's going with her roommate, who is also her closest and only friend in her first year at university. So she goes to another family's dinner, a big dinner with all of their family and all of their family's friends. And it is as awkward as you would expect. And then it proceeds to get even more so. And then it proceeds to get horrifying.
So there really is no like bottom to this, is there? It just gets worse and worse and worse.
Exactly. I started the story as a short story, and then I just kept coming up with new courses and new ways to make it worse and worse and worse. And I just wanted to see where that would go.
And we just kind of kept going down that rabbit hole. Got it.
Right.
Exactly.
Were you ever surprised by the depths that this thing went to?
On occasion, I try not to filter myself, especially when I'm writing horror. It's like, okay, let's just see where this goes. If I want to keep it to myself, I can keep it to myself later. But I do love that there is the genre of extreme horror and splatterpunk that allow to explore some of the depths that people do actually go. Do I think that there's a family like this out there? Probably not. But I assure you that there are really, really terrible people who are doing comparative things. So yeah, it's an exploration of the terrible things that people can do, and it's nice. It's not nice. It's important to know and to be there in a safe place and inside your own head. So yeah, it is a little alarming, but I tried not to hold back.
I hear you, because I definitely heard some horror stories from other friends that they go to like Thanksgiving or Christmas or what have you, and they're like, I am dreading this. This is going to be absolute hell because of so-and-so's there, or this thing's going on. And so they're just like, I usually tell them like, dude, why you going then? But it's a thing, you got to do it. And yeah, so was this meant to be kind of reflective of some of like the emotional or just awkwardness that happens at these kinds of gatherings?
One of the things that inspired me was when I was in a very similar situation. I was in a different town to go to university, and my roommate at the time invited me over to her parents' house because she lived locally. And you never know what it's going to be like to step into someone else's world. Now, this family, perfectly nice. They were a great family. But one of the things that they did was the mother said that we were going to have Southwestern soup, and it might be a little spicy. And, I grew up in Texas. I love my Tex-Mex. I love my spicy hot sauces and things like that. So I was expecting, something with a little heat. And I tried it, and there was no heat whatsoever. So it's just a little glimpse into what it's like to be in someone else's private world, because everybody's home is their own little microcosm, their own little universe, and you never know what it's like in that other world. And you can feel so alien or foreign being just in another person's house across the street from you.
We're going to dive more into the story and the characters, but I want to start with the cover for this thing because we were talking about this thing. This cover is, it's unsettling. It's this like for the folks at home, you'll see an image of the cover in the episode, but to describe it for you, it's basically this. It on the surface, it looks like it's just this nice little display of food on a cutting board. There's some veggies and such. It's
cool. A great Thanksgiving spread.
But then you're like, wait,
you didn't.
Is that blood? And is that an eyeball? And are those fingers? Are those fingers still attached? Oh,
you start to look closer.
Yeah, exactly. Where did this whole thing come from? Did you design this thing yourself?
No, I worked very closely with my editor, Ken Kane, who also is in charge of editing of the whole Torrid Waters imprints. And he does the covers for the imprint as well. So I worked with him, and I just love that he came up with this cover that looked like it could be a cookbook until you got a little closer.
It's like, this is
job.
Nice. Wait, what? Yeah. Ken, great guy, actually. I've spoken to him before in past episodes. We talked about the Torrid Waters. For those of us who are kind of new at this, what is Torrid Waters?
Torrid Waters is an imprint of Crystal Lake that focuses primarily on extreme horror, splatterpunk, and pulp horror. So basically anything that gets gory or it tends towards the extreme side of horror, torturous.
I like that horror has an extreme version too. You would think horror itself is just like, that's extreme, that's intense. But now it's like, no, it actually gets even more so. So very cool.
I love all the flavors of horror, from quiet and even cozy and slice of life all the way to extreme. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that we've actually gotten a chance to explore just doing this show and talking to different writers through publishers such as Crystal Lake. You got dream horror, you got psychological horror, you got torture horror, you got all kinds of stuff. So it's nice to kind of explore those different flavors. So was this your first time working with Torrid Waters?
Yes, I have worked with Crystal Lake before. I participate in their Shallow Waters flash fiction contests. I think I've had a short story or two published through their anthologies. So when I heard about this call for Torrid Waters, I immediately wanted to be a part of it, and I hope to continue being a part of it going forward, because I really appreciate that they appreciate that side of horror, as a lot of presses really don't want to touch it.
Given this is the extreme horror genre, was this a chance for you to just kind of cut loose and sort of be like, okay, all these ideas I couldn't do before, we're doing them here?
Absolutely. I think that's what's really, really freeing, that you don't have to fade to black. You don't have to be quite as creatively go around the torture or figure out a sanitary way of presenting it. And there is creativity in that as well for people who don't want to go into extreme horror, but it's really important to know that there is just as much creativity in showing that gore. And you can see that also in movies, where you have whole special effects teams going into really the artistry of the absolutely disgusting. So I like that we're able to do that in writing as well.
Now, it's mentioned in the description in this book that this is in the style of Hannibal, the Menu, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Do we see glimpses of those stories in yours?
Yes, absolutely. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is all about a family dinner. By the end of it, it's about family coming together for dinner, family time. And it really is about that microcosm of a world that is completely isolated from the larger society around it. In Hannibal, it's about cannibalism, and I brought cannibalism into that. But I wanted to kind of find a middle ground between the two, because you don't see a lot of cannibal horror that is strictly suburbia. It seems to be mostly the province of backwoods or rural and folk horror, and then on the other side you have the rich are so different foodie culture. And so I wanted to kind of hit right in the middle with a suburban neighborhood you would never suspect. but the same sort of thing is going on. And there is a lot of love for the recipes going into the cannibalism here as well, just as much love as the family dinner in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the love that Hannibal puts into his food.
Well, as long as there's love, that's good. We like that.
That's the main ingredient, to a good meal is love.
And, nightmares too, right?
Yeah, you never know what you're eating sometimes if someone else is making it.
A couple of screams from the side of the kitchen,
It's normal stuff, It's normal stuff.
So let's start with Sierra and Zoe. Tell us more about them, their background, characteristics.
Sierra is shy. She's in a new world. She moved from Canada to Texas, so she wanted to try new things and then discovered she might not quite be ready to do new things. But her roommate, Zoe, is much more confident, and her family lives close by, so she doesn't, feel as disconnected from her roots. So that's why when Thanksgiving comes around, Sierra can't go to her home for Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving is over. Canadian Thanksgiving is in October. So she has no reason to go home. So Zoe invites her to her house for Thanksgiving so that she can be surrounded by a family, get that experience, get some comfort food. The thing that's important about Zoe is that even though her family, of course, is doing terrible things. She loves her family. She loves Sierra. She wants Sierra to be there, to be a part of things. There's no real malice there when she introduces Sierra quite inadvertently to a nightmare. That's just her world. She doesn't know any other way. That's normal for her. So, she has an idea that is not like other people's worlds, which is why she doesn't explain anything to Sierra, even though she's supposed to. But no malice is meant. She really didn't explain things to Sierra because she wanted Sierra to be there. So one of the important things about the book is that it is about the friendship and the relationship that becomes a little bit more between them during the course of this meal. There's an innocence to that is absent in the main villain, who is the matriarch of the Samuels family.
So what is this feast, this dinner that she's invited to?
It's the Grand Samuels Thanksgiving dinner, and it's not just put everything on the sideboard and the counters and you do a buffet or a potluck kind of thing. No one but Mother does the courses for this meal. She plans it out and starts cooking a week in advance. She kicks everyone out of the kitchen. People can bring their own thing, but it's not encouraged, and it'll be saved for after the meal so that it doesn't, sully the plan. So Mother is very much a control freak, and she has an idea of how each course is going to go and the exact serving for each course. So she really does. It is an art for her, and it is a form of love and sharing, but she wants to share the best.
Sounds like my mother during Thanksgiving.
It is a 10-hour feast of multiple courses. You cannot get seconds. You have to eat what is presented to you exactly as it's presented.
Ooh, I don't know. See, I've had some weird foods over the years. I like to think I have a pretty diverse stomach, but I don't know. I get the feeling this would test that quite a bit.
When I was a kid, and to some degree even today, I do have texture issues with some foods. So this would definitely be a challenge for people with any problem with any food, because you have to eat it and you have to keep it down.
So this is just
otherwise
like
it's an insult.
The big warning signs that you would see in not big, but just the warning signs you would see on like menu items when you go to restaurants where it says no substitutions allowed.
Exactly. It would be an insult to her cooking to suggest that there was anything wrong with it as it's presented.
We've got a lot more to dive into, but now we're going to take a little bit of a break because the author is going to read for us a quick excerpt from the book. So, and this is any part of the book. This is not necessarily the first chapter. It can be any portion of the story. But Amanda, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
Okay, just to set the scene, this is the beginning of the feast, and it's the part that was inspired by my time with my roommate at her house. It's a jalapeno soup that is supposed to be spicy, but when Sierra tries it, there's absolutely no flavor whatsoever. She expected something that had a lot of flavor, and there's nothing. So she starts looking around for seasoning or condiments, anything, even something as basic as just a salt and pepper shaker. All right. I lean over and whisper behind Zoe's hair again. Who do I ask to pass the salt? The quiet table goes silent, and not in reverence. The family turns toward me, necks creaking and eyes unblinking. Their reaction alarms the other guests as much as me. My face is all eyes. My stomach still clenches, threatening to growl, but it would be more embarrassing this time, so I stiffen and pray my body disappears while all attention focuses upon me with an uncanny intensity, like a bad high school movie cliche. Mother sets her soup spoon on her bread plate. Her warm, welcoming smile curves down like melted wax into a frown. Only the sparkle in her eyes, from flickering candlelight, from life, convinces me that she is still there behind the exaggerated, cartoonish disappointment. She stands, bracing her hands on either side of her utensils as though to hold herself back from crawling onto the table like an angry lion. Who said they want salt? As though she can't follow the direction of everyone's gaze. Shame tightens an internal Iron Maiden around my chest, although I don't even know what I did wrong. She takes her sweet time finding me, though, looking down the line of people on either side of the tables until she reaches the end. Her attention slaps me into embarrassed mortification. In that moment, I can imagine no greater nightmare. As her interrogative gaze alights upon me, her frown does not soften, but she straightens, less looming, and lifts her chin. Her voice is soft with what I think is kindness. I suppose you must be forgiven. You're not of the family. I should have made the expectations clearer during our discussion. Or Zoe should have told you everything required before bringing you to our table. Mother levels her stunning maternal glare upon her daughter, who appears more inured to its effects, but not entirely unaffected. Her thigh tightens against mine. What I serve is what you eat. I've worked hard over the last week preparing these meals exactly as I intend them to be eaten. I will not have anyone insult me by requesting anything other than what is provided, as though what blessings flow are inadequate. Everyone's still staring at me. Even those behind me burn holes into the back of my head. Mother is a high judge, and I am small, with an audience of thousands silently condemning me to the gallows. Just when I think it can't get any worse, my vision swims. I refuse to cry in front of so many strangers. Biology disregards my wishes. It's exceptionally rude to require your host to allow you to alter the meal that they give you with the generosity of their time and effort. This isn't a restaurant where you can demand your meal to your satisfaction. This isn't a tailor to adjust everything to your fit. You accept what you're given with a grateful heart and you don't complain because you are young. You don't know what good food is. You don't have the palate and you don't have the experience. If you find yourself in need of salt, young lady, might I suggest those crocodile tears? She's just a teenager. One of the guests shrugged with a spoon, his grimace approximating a smile. Give the girl a break. She didn't know the rules. There's no reason to yell at anyone asking for a salt shaker. Pepper and salt are staples on most tables so people can season to taste. I make these dishes according to my recipes. Mother slams both her hands on the table to punctuate each emphasized word. My recipes, my mother's recipes, her mother's recipes. These recipes have been perfected over decades. Blood, sweat, and tears have been poured into them, sometimes quite literally. I have burn marks on my arms from the oven, sliced scars on my fingers from knives. I have cooked for my family when there was no heat, and I have cooked for my family when there was no air conditioning. In case it wasn't perfectly clear before everyone walked in today, if your mother taught you well, you will eat what I provide, every last drop, every last smear, and you will say thank you when you're done. Every element of every dish is sown with my love to feed the hungry. So you will not question my love. You will not question my spice, and you will not question my salt. Do you understand me?
And now we know where the title comes from. I
Yeah.
was wondering that
Yeah.
actually, but wow, that's intense. That is intense.
Like there we have the Leo DiCaprio meme pointing. There it is. There's the title.
Oh, yes, yes. I love that. I love that.
Enjoying the podcast? Get even more of the content you love from artists around the world on Citywide Bites. Experience the show live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Instagram. With our interactive short-form interview series, you can ask your questions and be a part of the action. Hosted by Max Bowen.
So we talked a little bit about Zoe and Sierra. We definitely learned a lot about Mother, but what about the rest of the family? Are they just kind of witnesses to all this? Do they have a larger role to play in the story?
Yes, I mean it's primarily Zoe and Mother, but there's also Zoe's older sister and the husband, who actually plays a very small role in comparison to Mother because Thanksgiving is her feast. But the father does participate in family cookouts and other dinners, other holidays, and things like that. But the table is full of their family, and it's full of their family's friends. Some of those friends know about the conditions of the table. They've been there before, and others are new. This is kind of their big initiation, but it's an initiation for something that they can never really escape. So it's kind of are you and can you handle this family? And if you can't, there are consequences. But if you can, there are benefits to that. So you have like business associations, you have potential marriages in the future. So you have significant others and things like that. So the family is all around them. And there's even a funny uncle, in the sense of the not so great sense of funny uncle. But, when you consider how terrible how terrible the things that everyone does, the funny uncle just doesn't even stand out. Everyone's funny here.
Yeah, I feel like the funny uncle could take a very different turn with this kind of story.
And it does. I'm not going to explain anything, but it does.
Fantastic. Now, of course, there is, as we mentioned before, the rule for this thing. Eat it, you enjoy it, and that's that. If it's not too spoilery, what happens if you break this rule? If you say, no, I got to have myself some salt.
Well, you can't leave. If you try to leave, you'll be brought back and you will be punished. And if you refuse to eat, or if your body refuses to accept it, you will still be expected to eat it, or you will become a part of the meal.
Okay, then.
But you'll become part of your own meal.
Oh, well, all right then.
And so we now understand that the mother is ruling the roost here, the matriarch. And so she is obviously the center villain that takes the stage here in the writing. But we could also look at it from a different point of view and ask, I think, what about Zoe in terms of being a potential villain here?
I would say that as part of the family and knowing the consequences of any problems, withholding the information definitely makes her culpable to what goes on. But I would say that so she's definitely an antagonist as well as a romantic interest. But I wouldn't necessarily say she's evil so much as misguided. So it's in terms of intentions, she's not quite as cognizant of how bad her family is as her mother is. She's still kind of growing into knowing what other families are like, and her intentions are good. And what comes out in the book is that not all feasts go bad. So under the best of circumstances, what I just read would have been the worst that happened. And occasionally it is. So I think Zoe was more hoping that it would stay fairly mild. But of course, she doesn't even think about, as the feast goes on, some of the courses get a little stranger and harder to swallow in both the literal and figurative sense.
I was just going to say, yeah. And so Sierra, of course, asking for some additional seasoning, right?
Mhm.
As things go on here and things start to go further south for the meal, how does she end up, without giving anything away, how does she end up kind of like surviving all of these things?
I'd say that as a shy person, she's overwhelmed by the family. She's overwhelmed by the awkwardness. And a lot of people do tend to go into fight or flight just from, cringe and awkwardness. And so Zoe's next to her, reassuring her that as long as she follows the rules, which are pretty simple at their core, everything will be fine. It's okay. It's okay. And one of the things I wanted to explore through this novel was kind of the effect of peer pressure, not just on teens, but on people in general, where on society, where when the right people are telling you it's okay, sometimes they'll just go along as a survival mechanism within the situation that you're in. And it's just kind of testing how far will people, how bad does it have to get before people stop accepting, especially when the consequence to resisting is so intense and extreme. For a good portion of it, it's just about Sierra dealing with how terrible everything is, but also just trying to get through it. It's a 10-hour multi-course marathon.
Yeah, it's definitely a long time. And, from the beginning to end, there's so many different nuances and things that are going on with the character and the changes. Talk to us a little bit about that, in terms of her character and the development, how it starts from when she gets there to the end. How do we see that kind of transform over time?
Well, ultimately, I think this is her trial by fire because there's so many terrible things going on. And at a certain point, it stops becoming just about believing Zoe that it's going to be okay. It stops being about just getting through to get by. She grows in the sense that she starts to try to figure out how to actively resist, which is hard when your exit is blocked. The doors aren't locked, but the exit is blocked, and you're surrounded by people who will not help you. And she's 18 at this point, so she still has the belief that, and she's 18 and she's fairly sheltered and she hasn't really been out in the world much, so she still has the belief that adults will save the day, that someone will resist and they'll be big and they'll be strong and they'll be able to stop it. And at some point, she realizes no one is saving me. I have to save myself somehow.
Hey, this is singer-songwriter Danny Horovitz, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout.
I'd like to dive a little bit more into that. Is Sierra a fighter as a character, or does she define that she can be one?
I would call her a fighter. She does not start out that way. There's the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses to fear, and she mostly freezes. So she just kind of gets insular and she just stays in that place, stays in that zone. But eventually she realizes that that isn't going to save her. So she has to move to a different response. Um, so, yeah, I would say that she eventually becomes a fighter. And it kind of reminds me of the Saw movies, where a lot of the people who are stuck in these traps, they won't fight very hard until the very end of their time, because that's how survival works. You're not going to put yourself in the path of being hurt until you absolutely have to. So even when you know that you only have a short amount of time, you'll still push it up to the end of that very short time before urgency will have you do something really extreme to get out of a really extreme situation. So I think this story, she starts out, resisting mentally, but eventually she reaches that point where she has to resist physically. But she still, no one wants to get hurt even then.
Now, this is far from your first writing. You've done a lot of stuff over the years: fantasy, poetry, short stories. The list is actually, just looking at your website, the list is quite long.
I like lists.
Lists are good. Yeah, very nice. Did Question Not My Salt take you in any new directions as a writer?
It's definitely more extreme than most of the stuff I've done. I mean, there's a lot of extreme that you can do in short stories, but it doesn't feel like a marathon. And this is like, how can I extend the tension for this long? So you're just constantly ratcheting and ratcheting and ratcheting and ratcheting. And it was an experiment to see whether I could do that. It was also an experiment of not knowing where the hell it was going, because usually I have some sort of idea. And in this case, I really didn't. It was more like, let's see what happens this time. What's this course? What terrible thing happens during this course? How can I make this more disgusting? It's just, it really was an experiment in improvisation, which is not my strong suit. But it was a lot of fun to do. It really was.
Yeah, and you talk about like ratcheting the tension. This book is 150 pages long, so I imagine that's probably a challenge too. Like, okay, when do I do this thing? How long do I do this thing? How often do I do this thing? Because you don't want to tire the reader out and make them say, "Well, this thing has already kind of worn me out. I'm done by page like 40 or so."
Well, I did write this without any chapter breaks, which is what kind of keeps the momentum rolling, because it's supposed to feel like a constant assault, just like it is on Sierra. But there are some moments where the reader can breathe, and there are actually some moments that are really sweet, which creates this contrast between the awful and the sweet, especially when they're happening at the same time.
I'll bet. All right. Well, we're coming down to the end of the conversation, folks. A few more questions to go. Amanda, one thing I wanted to ask about, you've included trigger warnings in this book, which we've seen some horror writers do. In fact, one reviewer said that I knew they were there. I still wasn't ready for it. Why did you want to include these?
I typically include content warnings because there are some things that even people who love extreme, there are just some things that they don't want to read. I know that a big one is animal death, and I have other novels that include animal death, mostly because it's a creature feature, so that there's some predatory behavior there. But I do know that there, especially with the inclusion of a funny uncle, there might be some people who are not willing to go down that path. It really is about letting people choose what they're willing to read. And someone might not know upon picking it up that it's an extreme novel. So it's just, even though it's sold that way, I think it's just important to let people have the chance to choose what they're reading. I don't like necessarily sharing them because I don't like sharing anything. If I could avoid putting the back cover blurb or anything like that, it's like I'm like, there are some people who love to know what's going to happen, and I'm someone who doesn't want to know anything. So even just sharing what something's about sometimes feels like I'm sharing too much, and I'm working on that, clearly. But I do know how important it is to respect that some people's hard limits are hard limits for a reason.
I like the idea of not having the blurb on the back of the book, though. That is such a cool concept.
It already feels like I'm giving away too much, but
right.
So I've kind of cultivated the art of from my own personal art of giving away just enough, like to this point this early point in the book, kind of like a really good trailer. all the trailers are, they give way too much these days, but a good trailer will stop at a certain point, and they really act as a tease rather than giving you everything. So I in my back cover copy, I tell you where you are and what the rule is, but I try not to give too much else away.
That's a good point. I remember seeing this one movie. I'm blanking on the name, unfortunately, but I saw the trailer. I thought, I think I just saw the ending of the movie, and I had actually. They somehow slipped up and put the ending of the movie in the trailer. It's like, wait, so we just saved like 2 hours. Great.
Yeah, like a lot of the movies. Or when I go to see movies in a theater, I see these trailers. It's like I'm pretty sure I just saw the movie in 2 minutes. Why do I have to go see it? Like Quarantine had the last scene in the trailer.
Yes.
Let's see. I think Ma had the last scene in the trailer. It's like, that is the opposite of what horror is. You're not supposed to know what happened. It's the mystery that makes it so tense, and you just gave everything away. Why would you do that?
In Quarantine has such a good trailer too, but you're right, the end's right there at the end of the trailer. I was like, fantastic. So you save yourself like $20 in like 2 hours. Good job, guys.
So that's why I try not to watch trailers if I can help it.
I understand.
Because I don't trust the publicist to actually tease me.
I see. Okay. All right, folks. Well, we are now down to the end here. Amanda, what's next for you?
In May, I have a short story coming out in Cosmic Horror Monthly. Pretty soon this summer, I'm putting out the 5th book of my fairy tale mashup series, Thorns. And then later this year, I should have a seasonal horror poetry collection put out called A Nightmare for All Seasons. Some of them are narrative and some of them are just a collection of poems. So that should be a lot of fun.
That sounds like amazing. That is such a cool concept. And I definitely want to check out the Thorn series too. We were looking at that on the site and I thought, this is a nice story. I like this one. Well, Amanda, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us. And folks, if you haven't bought your copy already, get Question Not My Salt. You can get it through Crystal Lake Entertainment. You go to amandamblake.com. It's all right there, all your purchasing options. If you go to your local bookstore, they don't have it, ask them to order a copy. It's what they do. And Amanda, definitely looking forward to the next conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it here. I would love to be back.
Absolutely. And Curtis, man, once again, thank you, sir. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, as always, Max. Amanda, thank you so much.
And thank you, sir.
Bye.
And with that, we bring this episode to a close. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, check us out on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, in Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. You can catch this and all your favorite episodes on your favorite podcast platform, and new episodes are added every week, as well as on Boston Free Radio every Saturday at 10 p.m. You get at me at citywidemax@yahoo.com if you want to suggest a guest, submit your music, or just drop us a line. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.